In August 1945, 2 atomic bombs didn't just destroy buildings, they erased entire cities from existence in a single flash of light. Over 200,000 people died instantly or in the weeks that followed as their bodies succumbed to burns, radiation, and a sickness that nobody understood. But there was one man who walked through both firestorms and lived. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi, and his story is proof that some horrors don't end when the explosion does. Before he became a symbol of impossible survival, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a simple engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, a man of precision and lines who designed the industrial machinery of Japan's dying war machine. Born in Nagasaki in 1916, he was 29 years old in the summer of 1945, married to Hisako and a father of their baby son, Katsutoshi, caught in the grinding machinery of the empire like millions of others. In the spring of 1945, that machine sent him on a business trip to Hiroshima, a routine assignment that would change everything. By the first week of August, his work was finished and he was packed to go home to Nagasaki, back to his wife and son. August 6, 1945 was supposed to be his last day in Hiroshima. A simple train ride home, nothing more. It started with a forgotten object. He and his colleagues were on their way to the train station when Yamaguchi realized he'd left his hanko, his personal seal used for signing documents, back at the office. He told his friends to go on without him and turned back to retrieve it. He was walking alone through a potato patch, just under 2 miles from what would become ground zero when he looked up at the clear blue sky. The system was still functioning, still grinding forward, completely unaware that in the next few moments it would cease to exist. At 8:15 in the morning, a B-29 bomber flew overhead and released a single object. Then the world broke. At first, there was no sound, only light. A flash so bright that it turned day into something beyond day. A light so intense that it bleached the color from everything it touched. His eyes, even closed, couldn't escape it. Pure instinct took over and he dove into an irrigation ditch, covering his eyes and jamming his thumbs in his ears just as the sound hit, not a boom. Still, the sound of reality tearing itself apart. A roar so powerful that it ruptured his eardrums and seemed to squeeze the entire world. The blast wave threw him out of the ditch and slammed him back down into the soft dirt. When he regained consciousness, the world had ended. The city of Hiroshima, which he had known minutes ago, was gone, completely gone, replaced by a smoldering ruin under a sick red-black sky. Buildings were flattened for miles, and a thick, greasy, radioactive black rain started to fall. He staggered to his feet and saw hell. Charred figures walking through the ash like ghosts, their skin hanging off them, calling out for water, for their mothers, for anyone to explain what had happened. 80% of Yamaguchi's body was burned. His face was charred, his arms were wrapped in burned skin that looked like leather. His back was a landscape of blisters and open wounds. Every breath hurt, and very movement was agony. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. He made his way to what was left of a hospital, the building partially destroyed, the staff overwhelmed beyond capacity to help. The doctors did what they could, which was almost nothing. They wrapped his burns in bandages and gave him water. But they had no understanding of what was actually happening to him because radiation sickness wasn't something they had learned about. Nobody had. The atomic bomb was entirely new, and nobody in the world knew how to respond. Yamaguchi lay in that hospital for 3 days of pain beyond description, 3 days of watching other patients die around him, 3 days of understanding that survival wasn't guaranteed and the system had failed. On August 8th, 3 days after the Hiroshima bomb, his employer sent him a message. Not asking if he was okay, not offering help. A simple bureaucratic demand. Return to work. The factory in Nagasaki needed him because the war wasn't over. Yamaguchi was an engineer and he had a duty. He was wrapped in bandages with 80% of his body burned, carrying radiation sickness poisoning his cells, though no one knew it yet, in unimaginable pain, and he boarded a train to Nagasaki. This is where the story becomes almost unbearable, because Yamaguchi didn't flee or hide or try to find safety. He obeyed. He got on a train to Nagasaki, wrapped in bandages, to return to work at a Mitsubishi factory, carrying his wounded body toward a city he didn't know that was about to be destroyed. The train was an Ark of the Wounded, packed with other hibakusha, the explosion-affected people, burned and bleeding and dying. For a moment, when he arrived home in Nagasaki on August 8th and saw his wife and son alive, he felt safe. But it didn't last. On the morning of August 9th, despite his terrible injuries, despite the fever and the pain and the radiation poisoning destroying his body from the inside, Yamaguchi dragged himself out of bed and reported to the Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki. He had to tell his boss what happened in Hiroshima. He stood there, a bandaged, half-deaf figure, trying to describe the indescribable. How a single bomb had leveled an entire city with one flash of light, had killed tens of thousands instantly, had turned Hiroshima into something that resembled hell more than a city. His boss stared at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're an engineer, Yamaguchi," the director scoffed. "You're clearly delirious from your injuries. How could one bomb destroy an entire city? You're mad." The words were still hanging in the air when the universe proved him sane. At 11:02 in the morning, a familiar, terrible light flooded through the office windows, the same blinding white flash he had seen 3 days before. His boss froze in place, unable to process what was happening. But Yamaguchi knew. He had seen this movie before. He had lived through this already. He knew exactly what came next because his body remembered. "That's the same thing," he thought, and he dove to the floor just as the office windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and splinters. The blast wave ripped through the building, carrying the same roar he knew all too well, the sound of a bomb consuming a city. For the second time in 72 hours, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was positioned just 3 kilometers from the heart of an atomic explosion. He pushed himself up from the debris, his crude bandages torn away by the blast. Incredibly, despite being 3 kilometers from ground zero, he hadn't been seriously injured in the second explosion. But his body had just absorbed a second massive dose of radiation, compounding the first, building up inside him, attacking every system. He fled into the streets, running through a city already turning to ash. His only thought was his family. Where was Hisako? Where was Katsutoshi? Were they alive? He found his house damaged but still standing. Inside, he found his wife and son alive. Hisako had taken their son out that morning to look for burn ointment for her husband's injuries from Hiroshima. Because of that decision, because she had left the house, they were in a safer spot when the second bomb fell, far enough away to survive. If Yamaguchi hadn't been burned in Hiroshima, if he hadn't needed treatment, his family would have been home at ground zero. They would have been among the 70,000 dead. For the next week, Yamaguchi drifted close to death, convinced this was the end. The combined radiation from 2 bombs ravaged him systematically. All of his hair fell out. He had a violent, non-stop fever. He couldn't stop vomiting. His body was attacking itself from the inside because the radiation had scrambled his immune system beyond recognition. The medical system was just as broken as it had been in Hiroshima. There was no medicine, no treatment for radiation sickness because no one yet understood what radiation sickness even was. He lay in the dark, sure he was going to die. But Tsutomu Yamaguchi didn't die. Slowly, painfully, over weeks and then months, his body started to heal in ways that doctors still don't fully understand. On August 15th, the emperor announced Japan's surrender. The war was over, but for Yamaguchi, a long private war was just beginning. For decades, he barely spoke about what happened. Like many survivors, he faced prejudice from people who wrongly believed radiation exposure was contagious. He worked as a translator and teacher and eventually returned to Mitsubishi as an engineer, trying desperately to build a normal life. But the bomb's math has a long, cruel shadow. His wife, Hisako, who was exposed to the black rain in Nagasaki, died of cancer in 2008. His son Katsutoshi also died from cancer in his 50s. Yamaguchi himself suffered from radiation-related illnesses, including leukemia, for the rest of his life. It was only in his later years, after his son's death, that he felt compelled to speak out. He wrote a book and, in his 90s, traveled to New York to speak at the United Nations about the horror of nuclear weapons. In 2009, the Japanese government officially recognized him as the only Niju hibakusha, a twice-bombed person. "My double radiation exposure is now an official government record," he said. "It can tell the younger generation the horrifying history of the atomic bombings even after I die." Tsutomu Yamaguchi died of stomach cancer on January 4, 2010. He was 93 years old. He lived for 65 years after the bombs, 65 years of pain and illness and loss, 65 years of being marked by atomic fire, 65 years of carrying the memory of what happened when humanity created a weapon it could not control. His story isn't one of luck. It's a solemn reminder of the abyss we created when we figured out how to split the atom. It's the record of one man who stood at the edge of that abyss twice, whose quiet survival is the most powerful argument there is for making sure that the fatal math of atomic weapons is never calculated again. What do you think kept Yamaguchi alive? Was it hope, duty, or pure will to survive? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more.